2012. What were the obstacles in getting this to the screen, and how much of it was finding the right Charlie?
That was the biggest challenge, was figuring out Charlie. When I saw the play 10 years ago, it was I was really moved by these characters that were very, very different from myself. And at the end, I felt how hopefully you guys feel now. And then I met with Sam, and Sam started to work on the screenplay, and we worked on it for a while. And but I just couldn't figure out the Charlie of it all. There was nothing that really excited me to get out of bed and fight for it. And then I saw the trailer to a low-budget Brazilian film, and Brendan was in it, and it was one of those aha moments. I hadn't thought of him, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea. And then he lived on the East Coast. That's us. And he came to visit me, and he was a complete gentleman and super sweet and clearly very hungry to take something on. That's where it began.
So we'll get to more on Brendan in a moment, but was technology a factor? And obviously this is not a big special effects spectacle, but in terms of the digital sculpturing and the 3D technology you had to do, I mean, the Charlie we see here, in order to make him move as naturally as he does, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, probably not the Charlie we see.
Yeah, the second phone call I made after we decided to do it with Brendan was to Adrian Moreau, a makeup artist I've worked with since The Fountain, and just wanted to see if it was possible, because the history of prosthetics to sort of represent people living with obesity is often, well, it starts off with the characters. The characters themselves are often jokes or punchlines or evil characters, and they're not considered real human beings. And so the first question was like, is this at all possible? And he thought that there was just new techniques that made it possible. It was also, when we decided to really start to go, it was in the middle of COVID. So there was all those restrictions as far as how to create models and figurine. So we ended up using a lot of new technology to figure it out. But the second rule I gave to Adrian was I didn't want any of the makeup to in any way interfere with a single wrinkle or crease on Brendan's face, because I wanted him as an artist to be able to use his entire instrument. So basically the thing comes up and wraps around the side of his face, but everything is Brendan that you see, 100%. So, and there's very, very few, there's really no digital work, CGI work. There's some cleanup sometimes when, as makeup progresses during the day, you run into problems, but if you saw the makeup in real life, it was 100% convincing.
So how far did you actually get in terms of casting or trying to cast anyone else in this role? Did you screen test anyone?
Yeah, there wasn't really screen tests. There were a lot of meetings. There were a lot of looking at tape. There was a lot of considerations. But no one really just excited me. And people have asked me about that decision, and I've talked about it earlier today for people that are the master class, but I didn't even see much of his work. I'm not really a George of the Jungle fan, but I hadn't seen Gods and Monsters, where he did a dramatic turn. I hadn't seen School Ties, and there was just a gut feeling that there was something there that needed to happen. So I was discovering as much of it as I got to know Brendan over the course of making it as anyone was.
I'm not overly familiar with all of his 90s work either.
A lot of people are, though.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I discovered. I'd love to be able to say it was a calculation that I was going to, everyone was wanting the Renaissance, but it was not. I mean, there's bumper stickers that say, "Have you heard Brendan Fraser is back?" So it's awesome. But I had no idea about the love for the human that he is I just felt it was right, and this is all kudos that it's happening for him.
Well, he was never someone who, when I did see his films, I never thought of him as a small in stature, and he had a voice, if not booming, a big voice. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically here with this character is, in reflecting on the performance, I think so much about how he uses his voice and how there's an inherent sort of vulnerability to it and a quietness and a fragility that I think calls attention to his desire to connect with people. And is that something that struck you as well in casting him?
I like that. Not really. It was just unexpected. There was this one moment in this whole kind of craziness that's happened. When we went to the Toronto Film Festival, he got this award for best performance or something, and me and Sam, the writer, presented him the award. And before they did it, they rolled a reel of his career, and it was mostly the films from the '90s, and then there were a couple of clips from The Whale. And that, to me, was like a staggering moment, just to see, because there is this purity and innocence that's in all those early roles that I think is what connected for people, because it kind of plays comedically, but I think there's a purity to that is Brendan. And then it's there again in Charlie, but in a much more rich, complex way. And it's almost impossible to believe when I was watching it that that's the same human. But it is the same human. And I think it's exciting because he's suddenly this new actor and voice that so many people clearly love, and is because that's not, so, spoiler alert, but Brendan is not Charlie. They're no way related to each other, the actual human Brendan and the character Charlie. That's an acting job. So the potential of what Brendan is going to bring to the big screen and the little screen and all the screens is really exciting. As a fan now, myself, I'm excited to see what he does.
I want to talk about the adaptation and the adaptation process. This is Samuel Hunter from the play, as we said, adapting it for the screen. It's as faithful, having read the play, it's as faithful an adaptation as I can think of. And I'm curious about that. That seems rare to me, that something is, in terms of characters, structure, thematically, dialogue, it's almost all there on the page. Why was that the right approach? Why did you feel like you had everything there to work with?
Sam talks a lot about this, that he was relieved when I said I didn't want to open it up, which would have been the natural thing, as Sadie in school or something like that. And I just always thought there was something really challenging about setting a film around the couch. My last film was, I reduced it to a house, so I figured I'd add to the challenge. But how do you make something cinematic that is so tight? And what's interesting when you watch a play, it's often like watching theater is almost like a slice of a pie, because you're always looking at the direction. But when you make a movie, you can get inside the pie, and so that was really fun to figure out how to make it as dynamic as possible. And I mean, film is ultimately three things: it's camera, light, and performance. At the core of it, I used to always say that. And so to reduce it down to those three things, and to try to figure out how to use the camera and light precisely in every scene, was a great exercise for me and my team, because during COVID, when things should be simple, we return back to the basics.
Well, something that isn't replicable in the theater that you can do on film, obviously, because you're right, that's the impulse, is to want to expand it. A lot of times that's a criticism of movies that are adapted from plays, is to somehow make it bigger. This is all confined. But you're watching this, and the fact that you can utilize that tool, which is the close-up, and so much of this film depends on these characters' faces. And I wonder too if that's a reason why you went to the 1:3:3 aspect ratio as well.
Yeah, so he's talking about the shape of the square. You might have noticed that it was like that shape, and we did that because the close-up was huge, and the performances were huge and really important. But also, you shoot the widescreen when you're doing a spaghetti western and you're out shooting beautiful landscapes. Just getting more books on the left and right of frame didn't really do anything for us. And also, it's really, the characters are so separate in this, because all the characters are kind of not, they're in their own world, so I didn't need to use the longer frame. So there were several decisions. The studio was a little nervous because they get pushback from international territories for sales, but it just felt like the right decision, and it really works for the framing.
I read where you said we wouldn't leave a scene unless we were spent. How does that?
That's always my thing.
Yeah.
And what that
How
just
does that
means-
manifest itself on set?
It just, I really, it sounds like everything is exhausting. It's not. It's just making sure that the actors are all satisfied, that they got everything that they want to try out. And for myself, all the different ideas, and for Sam Hunter, the writer who would be there, sometimes he would be like, oh, maybe there's a way of thinking about the words this way. So I wanted everyone to get a chance to bring it to the edit room.
One of the departments